I'm here at a friend's property on the St. Johns River, and along the edge of their property, they actually have bananas just growing in the ditch here in the wild. Now, in USDA zones 9 through 12, this is a pretty common, experience. So I thought, since some of these bananas are starting to be ripe, it's a cool opportunity for us to take a closer look at the bananas, go a little bit more in depth with it, and maybe even harvest a rack. So here on this scenario, it's literally just growing along the edge of a ditch. This is a wet ditch, so there's usually water pretty much at all times. The water level does raise a little bit during the rainy season, but these have been producing for quite a few years here. You can see up here at the top, there's a rack there. There's a couple racks that are in the back over here, and there's another one that's ripe on this side. These are probably the burro bananas that are kind of in the vein of like a plantain when they're young, but then they kind of turn into a nice fat Chiquita style banana when they're a little bit older. Sometimes they're called the Orinoco banana, but the flavor on them is really fantastic and, pretty cold hardy. I would say most bananas are going to be in the same range as far as their cold hardiness. So if you can grow one banana, for the most part, you're going to be able to grow them all. Sometimes in the cooler years, they may die back to the ground in USDA zone 9. But they usually always come back. Now, obviously, these bananas have not been trimmed up. They've not been pruned, very little fertilization. But I want to kind of go through some of the details on bananas. So I like this as an example. I really like to grow bananas in groups of 3, where you've got your grandmother, a mother, and then a pup. Now, there is a lot of debate about the types of pups. This one here is called a sword sucker. This one was probably a water sucker, has the fatter leaves when they first emerge, versus a sword sucker has the thinner leaves. Now, both of those type of suckers are going to produce fruit. However, the water suckers are going to take a little bit longer and may not produce quite as many, but they are still going to produce a good harvest. So I don't like them to get in massive groups. It just makes harvesting and maintenance really hard, and then it makes it a lot harder to divide. So for me, a group of 3 or 4 is about the maximum. Now you can see, because these are growing in the wild over here, that's a really dense clump. So this is going to make it really hard, not only to clean it up, but also to divide it if I wanted to, and then to remove the parent plant after they're done flowering and fruiting. So for the most part, bananas can be 1 calendar year for you to be able to get fruit. Once they do start to fruit, you'll see the long rack will come down. This is actually way too long. I like to cut these off when they're about here, when that flower set is about there. This flower is edible. A lot of great recipes available online. Now, as far as when to harvest, that's a pretty big debate. It depends on who you ask scenario. So, practically, you can let bananas ripen right on the tree. The problem in this scenario is, 1, neighbors or trespassers could take them, or 2, critters are going to go after them. So I like to harvest mine when the first bananas start to turn yellow. I'm going to cut off most of that hand. Now, let me show you the difference between cutting off a hand and cutting off a rack. You could cut this entire thing off here, hang it in a nice sunny place, and let it just ripen naturally. But I like to do one hand at a time. So in here, I'm just going to cut off that one set of fingers instead of cutting off the whole thing. Let one banana get ripe on the next one, cut that hand off. Let one banana start to get ripe on that one, cut that hand off. I like them to be attached to the parent plant as long as possible, because they're taking more and more nutrients and putting it into the fruit. Now, once you've harvested that banana, you can go ahead and cut the mother plant down. So at that point, she's only absorbing and taking in nutrients to do nothing. It's not going to produce a second rack of bananas for you. So it's just going to give you the one, and then you let the next generation of bananas come up after that. So typically what I do is, when I cut down the mother plant, I chop it in lots of pieces with a machete. It's a great way to take out all your anger and stress and anxiety, and chop it up and throw it at the base of another banana and let it feed that cycle. Because remember, bananas are extremely heavy feeders. They've got to have a lot of food, a lot of nutrients, and a lot of water. Now, in this particular scenario, a lot of the nutrients is coming from the ditch here, and it's getting a lot of good high-density nutrients. This is not a traveled road, so I'm not worried about toxins that are being in there. But if you're not growing along the edge of a body of water, you're probably going to be feeding your bananas some compost, a foliar spray, blood meal, bone meal, almost every month during the growing season if you really want maximum production. Otherwise, do a banana circle. Throw a compost pile in the middle of it so that way your compost and waste is actually going to a purpose and feeding your banana system. And if you want more information on how to set up a banana circle, there's a free article at permaculturefx.com. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to harvest that rack of bananas, or a hand of those bananas, get them hung up inside the screened-in porch to start curing and ripening, and maybe even fry one up like a plantain. As always, have fun, and I'll see you in the garden.